processing, field to table care, all kinds of topics. And you can find out more details about this event August 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, just ahead at yowhunting.com. That's YOW hunting.com. Visit Candy Yao directly at her email, candy@yowhunting.com as well for more details. We appreciate Snowy Mountain Lodge and their support of the Talk Shop. Home on the Range Animal Haven entered their Good Times raffle with more than $6,000 in collective prizes. You have your choice. First drawn, first to choose between 5 amazing packages. A commuter e-scooter package, Discover Laradise package. It's a dog's life package. The fun and fitness selection, as well as chill and grill. Oh man, tickets available. You got to know where to get them, right? LaramieHomeOnTheRange.org. That single place will get you connected online. That's LaramieHomeOnTheRange.org. Don't have a computer? How about visiting the Pedal House, Hydro Hounds, or the Still right here in the Gym City? More than 50 groups, organizations, businesses supporting Home on the Range with their prizes and donations. Might you support this 501c3 as well? We sure hope you join us in collectively doing that. Now, we've got in studio guest Joseph Kibler, governor candidate for governor in Wyoming for the 2026 campaign. It's all part of our Candidate Awareness Tour 2026, beginning after this.
Hey, Wyoming, good morning. Good to see you all. Hope you're doing well. I'm here live in Laramie at the Talk Shop with Eric and really looking forward to our conversation today. We're going to be doing off the cuff, raw, unscripted Q&A and just really having a conversation about the governor's race, about what's going on in Wyoming, about the hot topics, about competitors in the race already. We're going to talk about issues that matter to all of us here in Wyoming. We'll probably talk about maybe property rights, maybe some water runoff, maybe some taxes. We'll see. We'll see. I know Eric's got a pile of questions from his audience for me today, and so we're going to go ahead and we're going to get this party started here pretty quick, aren't we, Eric?
Yeah. Right off the bat, we are ready to roll the Talk Shop in Studio 255. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the Talk Shop, but each election cycle, we started the Candidate Awareness Tour in 2022. We repeated it in 2024, and we did a third edition. Just said we're going to do it again, 2026. One of the additions that we're looking forward to doing is not only inviting candidates, but we're going to have a citizens tour as well. The citizens and the citizens' voice. What is your public comment? What are the questions you want asked and answered? And those questions, some of them we have here today for the Talk Shop for Joseph Kibler, our Wyoming governor candidate for 2026 from Cheyenne, Wyoming. Joseph, how about for those that are unfamiliar with you and your campaign, the first is an introduction by you yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hey, good morning, everybody. Great to be here. Eric, thank you so much for having me. This is our third interview, and I've just been so thrilled and so blessed to be here. So I really appreciate that. My name is Joseph Kibler. I'm running for Wyoming governor. I'm 46 years old. I live just north of Cheyenne with my wife and kids. 3 kids, homeschool kids, farm kids. We have a great time. I'm a business owner. I was a firefighter for 20 years. And Eric, I've spent most of my adult life in some type of public service area and also in leadership roles. And last summer, I felt sort of the urge, the calling, if you will, Eric, that it was time for me to start thinking about what the next chapter looks like for me. And I went through quite a lot of just different things and just thinking and praying and considering, God, what do you have for me next? And if you had asked me even a year and a half ago, Joseph, do you think you'll run for governor in 2026? I would have told you, What are you thinking? What are you even talking about, Eric? I would never think of even doing something like that. I mean, a lot of people have asked me, Joseph, you're even in your right mind? Who wants to get involved in this mess? And Eric, the bottom line is that this this run for governor is it's different, and I know a lot of so-called politicians or people like to say, well, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do something different. You elect me and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But this is really something that not only was it put on my heart to do this, and does it lead to the governor's office? Does it lead to the next chapter that God's got for my life, my family? But I will tell you this, Eric, that through this journey, as I wake up every day and go, what's next? Today it's this interview. As I walk through these doors, the purpose of this campaign is beginning to come clear. Based on experience, based on the division and the divisiveness that I see, that based on this sort of disdain that we have for our fellow man in politics, not only in politics, but outside of politics. This needs to be more than just political talking points, more than just fear mongering. I'm going to put fear into you so that you vote for me. We need to have principles and purpose in what we're doing, and we need to be beyond that, Eric. And so for me, this run for governor, it's really super personal in the sense that I've got nothing to gain by doing this at all. But what I hope to do is bring gain to the people of Wyoming. There's that silent majority out there, Eric, that doesn't get to tell their story. I want to tell that story. I want to have those conversations. And it might be with people that some of us aren't used to hearing from. It might even be with people that can't even vote for me, and things like that, because we need to get our humanity back, Eric. I think it's just so important. I think we've lost civility. We've lost this human kindness in all of this, Eric. And so, for me, in a nutshell, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I know, Eric, we're going to dig into some of more of the purpose and the reasons for my run for governor and why I think I'm a great candidate for being the leader of this state.
Joseph Kibler in Studio 255 at the Laramie Plains Civic Center joins us today with this segment brought to you by Home on the Range, Animal Haven. Their Good Times raffle with tickets available at LaramieHomeOnTheRange.org, and Yow Hunting Camp for ladies and kids. This will be hosted at Snowy Mountain Lodge above Centennial, Wyoming, with all their classes and all the details available in detail at yowhunting.com. Good morning, Joseph. Thank you for that introduction.
Yeah,
You started your campaign. Frankly, I want to set the record straight. You announced your campaign earliest January. You were the first of now three total candidates for Wyoming governor in 2026. And not that necessarily means good, bad, or other.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to get after it in January?
Yeah, no, that's a great
A lot
question.
of people are waiting. I mean, they're clearly waiting. Some contend, as our audience suggests, that current elected officials are politicking, surveying the land on Wyoming taxpayer dime.
Yeah, I mean, it could be happening. That might be that campaigning could be happening on Wyoming taxpayer dime. It's nice to be able to travel the state, things like that, I think. But that'd be interesting. That'd be interesting to look at and see if that's actually going on, Eric. I would be very curious. But we do have a system that always does favor, those that are already in office. But I think to answer your question, Eric, and I can see the benefits and the downsides to that. To answer your question directly, I started early because I wanted people to have time to get to know me. I think one of the things that we fail to do for a variety of reasons is actually take the time to get to know our candidates. And because I've not been in politics, and while I've been in other areas of public service in my life, and I always had a great interest in politics, to be honest, I've not played in that sandbox. And so I wanted to give the people of Wyoming sufficient time to get to know me. And yeah, there are those that are already committed to candidates. There are those that are waiting for some of our current state leaders to make a decision on where they're going. Am I going to run for Congress? Am I going to run for governor? Am I going to do this? So they're waiting to decide who they're going to get behind or who they're going to support. But in the meantime, what I can do is give Wyoming a true opportunity to get to know me so that they could say, hey, yeah, you know what? We could see Joseph being a governor, being a good governor. I've gotten to know Joseph. I've had the time to do that. And so that's why I started early. A lot of that has to do with, you know what? I don't have name recognition. Who is this guy? I'm going to coin the phrase that the Cowboy State Daily, poignantly put, taken slightly out of context, no doubt, but that, hey, when nobody is running for governor, you got people have got to get to know you. And so that's the main reason for starting so early, Eric.
One question comes from online, and it's regards the Freedom Caucus.
Yeah.
What is the Freedom Caucus in your eyes? And good, bad, reflect on their
Yeah.
activity in Wyoming. Has Wyoming received what Wyoming voted for? Have the citizens gotten what they bargained for?
I think it's a mixed bag with the Freedom Caucus, to be honest. And one of the things, I'm just going to say this to you, to Wyoming, is I've made a decision kind of early on in this that while there are things that I like about the Freedom Caucus, there are things that I like about MAGA. There are things, that there are things that I like about these different, I guess if you want to call them conservative ideologies. I don't know that having these labels and having these divisions is really what truly serves Wyoming. And what do I mean by that? Well, there are things that I love about what the Freedom Caucus has done, but there are things that I will openly say I don't love. Do I like, I'm a homeschool dad. Do I like having more homeschool freedom? Yes, absolutely. I love that. Do I think that parents should get to pick what their kids are being educated and how they're being educated? Yeah, absolutely. Uh, do I like having lower property taxes? Yes. But I think what I would ask Wyoming is, are we getting actual solutions, or are we getting more legislative band-aids for the things that we deal with? And secondarily, in a lot of ways, whether it's the Freedom Caucus or the Wyoming Party or the GOP or whomever, and I'm not trying to isolate these people, because honestly, I think it would be great if some of these people would look at me and hopefully maybe I'll get some of those endorsements, some of those support from some of these folks. But I would say that in ways we're just getting more of the same in a different way. We're saving money over here, but we're putting it in a different basket over here. We're saying that we want to stop labeling and stop polarizing, but then we're attempting to polarize and label judicial and school boards. We want them to be more politicized and more, where do they align politically? What I want to see is pulling back from polarization. So when I see that we're getting more of the same and just with a different label or a different name on it, I don't think that it truly serves the interest of the average person in Wyoming, like myself or like you. When are we serving the people? When we're further labeling and further polarizing or silencing our dissenters or not having open dialogue and discussion. And so it's bag. And I say here just going to be honest about that. There are things that I love about what they've done. There are things that I don't love, things that I don't think that were ready for prime time. They passed a bunch of bills, Eric, that we knew were going to go to court. Like probably would not hold the sniff test against the Wyoming Constitution. But we did it anyway.
Was that clearly to send a message to the executive branch and judicial branch and the citizens of Wyoming that we need to call a question on certain topics? You need to swing the pendulum just a little bit further in order to get a perspective that might center our community, center Wyoming more central to everyone's representation. One constituent's concern is, I don't feel represented by people that are elected to office. That's sad that they, if because they're a D or an R or some other label of party, they don't get response at all by
Yeah.
elected incumbents.
Well, I mean, part of the problem with that is the fact that we are so over lobbied, and I sympathize with our legislative body in this sense, is that we are so over lobbied, by the way, an environment and a culture and a bureaucracy that we have created, that it's very difficult for the average Joe, so to speak, to be able to have that dialogue with their representative, especially in like a digital way. I think a lot of our representatives, I think if you reach out to their offices or you try to get a hold of them directly, they're willing to sit down with their constituents. They don't feel heard during the legislative session, but you got to remember, we got 165 pages of registered lobbyists in
Yeah.
this state.
Yeah.
And so we created this environment where everyone has to get permission for everything from the legislature or from their
We're
representatives.
4 months past legislative session.
Yeah.
And many invitations to the talk shop go unanswered as a media outlet. Yet elected officials will be critical of lack of media coverage.
Mhm.
And it's a topic that it can be frustrating, but you endeavor and you continue on and you do everything you can on a day in, day out basis to cover the topics that are important to Wyoming. You started your campaign red, white, and blue with faith, family, freedom, and future.
Mhm.
8 months progressing in this year,
Mhm.
you are signing Be Something Different. Your signage notes that we can fight for the truth and be people at the same time.
Yeah.
Talk about a little
Yeah.
in depth about that transformation in your campaign. What have you realized visiting 23 counties in Wyoming?
Yeah, I haven't quite been to all 23 yet, admittedly, Eric, but I have gotten around a bit. And I will tell you this, that you got to be more than just a campaign. Oh, hey, I'm running for governor. And a lot of this has been me discovering the purpose of that, Eric. I got to be just more than just another candidate on the wall, right? Another person in the pool. And so a lot of what I've done is I've begun this journey is every single day I wake up and go, what is my purpose today? What is it that I need to learn? What is it that I need to get knowledge of? But also, what is it that Wyoming needs and wants and wants? I think it's so important. And that's not something that I fully had flushed out at the beginning of this campaign, just being honest. It's like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I think the purpose is something that's going to be discovered. And so here's what's happened. As I've sat in rooms of the GOP, in various places across the state, as I've listened to the people in Wyoming, I've seen this massive void, this gap where we've got these different factions of conservatism, if you will. I'm just going to call it that. I think that's the best way I could describe it. And all they do is fight with each other. Ronald Reagan, I think, said it really, really well. The person who agrees with you 80% of the time is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor, is kind of what Ronald Reagan said. But we've got this idea that we're either all or nothing. And as a result of that, we don't have conversations. And yeah, so one of my signs says, be something different. What has occurred to me as I've seen this fighting and this division is that we all talk about doing something different. But until we're actually willing to look at ourselves in the mirror and go, I got to be something different first. I've got to be something different before I can do something different and make a choice within myself. And a lot of this goes back to my faith too, Eric, but that when I'm in a room of people, I've got to be something different than what's going on now. And so that was born, and then this idea that I think we could fight for the truth and be people of integrity at the same time. What does that mean? That means that I don't need to trash talk my fellow man. That means that I don't need to, and Eric, I'll share this experience with you. I spent the better part of like 3 hours at the No Kings protest at the Capitol. And that was not to campaign. It was not to bring my political talking points. It was just to hear why they were out there, to have meaningful conversations with these folks. Well, some of our legislative leaders saw that, and many of them approached me at different times and said to me, why would you waste your time with that trash out there? And when some people said these kinds of things to me, it occurred to me as like, really, like, this is how we view our fellow man. This is how we're treating our fellow man. And it's like, we've got to be something different, you guys. And so that's my challenge. If you're watching this video and you're on the right or the left or the center, or you're independent or you're a constitutional party or you're a libertarian, whatever you are, ask yourself, are we really serving the people if we're not willing to truly be something different? And so that's what they're going to see from this campaign, is someone that's being something different, where we can have integrity and have civility, Eric, and still get the job done for Wyoming.
So returning to that former question, is Wyoming getting what they bargained for in the service of elected officials today?
I think it's a mixed bag, but this is where I go back to the first pillar of my campaign, which is faith, Eric. I think so often we elect people and we put our faith in them. Like, they're gonna, like, let's say I get elected governor, and and you vote for me, and because you're like, you really like what I have to say. Guess what? You're probably not going to agree with what I do 100% of the time.
Sure enough.
Right? But we've got this idea. So first of all, let me say this. We elect people, we should not put our faith in them. We should not lick their boots. We should not worship them and think that somehow they're going to solve all of our problems. That's mistake number one. Number two, I think it's a mixed bag with our elected officials. Whether you look at Mark Gordon or the Freedom Caucus or just down the line, you're going to get a mixed bag. And you cannot have this expectation that we're going to agree 100% of the time. I mean, I think there's a couple of things, with our current governor. He's got a PR problem. I don't think that he, maybe in person he communicates well, but does he come to the shop and occasionally and talk to Wyoming in more of a broad sense? Hey, this is why I made this decision, or this is why we're going this direction, or whatever, rather than just releasing a newsletter or what have you. And secondarily, what do you stand for? Because when you walk it, if what you stand for changes when you walk into a different room, then you're a double-minded man. And the Bible says a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. And so that's why you get mixed results with leaders. Or are you consistent with what you stand for? Because let me tell you this, if you just tell the truth all the time, you never have to remember a thing you say, right? Because
Governor Mark Gordon reportedly has family origins to New York, and through life found himself in Wyoming. You have noted openly that your origins are not Wyoming, but they're Wyoming today. Talk a bit about that, if you would.
I'd love to talk about that. So born and raised in Southern California. Yeah, in the belly of the beast, if you will, when it comes to politics, policies, and ideas, for sure. I mean, but if you take the time to look at even, hey, our current Secretary of State, guess what? Not a native Wyomingite. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Was also raised in California. It's actually hard to find some of this information online, by the way, because a lot of it seems to have been buried. But, he is Wyoming now. He represents Wyoming. I've got nothing, 60% of Wyoming currently, actually over 60% of us are not born here in Wyomingites. But Eric, I have something a little bit more profound to say to this issue, because I hear this a lot, especially on Facebook, our keyboard warriors, always saying, well, you're not from Wyoming, so I can't vote for you. Guys, you've been electing Wyomingites for decades, and this is where we're at. So I'd like you to ask yourself this question. Is electing just Wyomingites the best for Wyoming? And I would say this, kind of an interesting thing. I was, what week were, so a week ago from last Tuesday, I don't know if you know this, but we were fighting for private property rights and home occupation permits and things at the Laramie County Commissioners meeting. And about 300 of us showed up there. And 80% of the people that stood up and said, we do not want the county to have more authority in our lives. We came to Wyoming to get away from this intrusive government. 80% of the people that stood up against that, guess what? They were not from here, but they came here for that and they were fighting for it. But guess who is trying to pass these intrusive rules, these heavy-handed bureaucracies? This home occupation permitting that basically if you breathe in your home, you need a permit for it. Guess who's trying to pass that? Oh, these proud second, third, and fourth generation Wyomingites are trying to get this stuff done. Well, that's kind of strange.
What was the result of public turnout in Cheyenne, Wyoming, in Laramie County?
Yeah, well, thankfully the commissioners did listen at least to a portion of the argument. We did win, I'd say, half the battle. And while they did still pass the rezoning and a bunch of other stuff, while there is still some home occupation rules in place, we won a lot of that battle, but we didn't win the war yet. I would say this, and this is my stand on this. What you need to do is you need to roll back. You just need to leave people alone. The county needs to leave people alone, period. But the county does need to have common sense, good neighbor rules that they could use for enforcement, right? They need, because the role of government, safety is part of the role of government and stuff like that. And we have 17/100% of a problem in our county, apparently. 126 complaints in 19 months. So we don't really have a problem. But giving the counties the tools that it needs to enforce those moments, right? When someone is, trying to build a nuclear power plant on their property, maybe the county should get involved. When someone is trying to run a medium commercial or industrial operation on their 9 acres, the county should probably get involved. But leaving the rest of us alone. So having those good neighbor.
You're talking home-based businesses.
Yeah. They were trying to get it so that if you basically any type of conduct of anything, I mean, you occasionally weld a couple of things for your neighbor. Well, you now need a county permit for that.
Lemonade Day. Look out.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't say whether it went so far as to say that lemonade stand needed a permit, but boy, it was pretty darn close, Eric.
It feels closer to that.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
You're talking about overreach. You're really talking about something that transcends local matters. It's state and federal overreach actions as well. And these, let me guess, there was a proposal for a fee to be attached to the application for that zoning or for that permit. This or that. Never is free.
Well, I guess the generous dictators, we're going to waive the fee the first year for us, but then that fee, of course, could be
like an HOA.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Association.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well call it a county homeowners association. Without that label, I don't think the county really likes to call it that. But you know what? The bottom line is they gotta step back and realize, in many ways, Wyoming is kind of the last frontier in a lot of these ways. But you see this stuff creeping in, and it was the people who have experienced this firsthand, like myself, in other places, that were standing there and fighting against it. Yeah, there were a few people that stood up to that podium that were born here and native and saw through this. But it was mostly those of us that were fighting. And so a lot of the people that I see fighting these fights, they're not these fourth generation Wyomingites. They're people like me who have been here for 5 or 6 years, brought their family here for freedom and personal property rights and things like this, and seeing that being taken away. And we're going to fight for that, Eric. We're going to fight for that.
If you're just joining us, the Talk Shop visiting this morning with Joseph Kibler for Wyoming governor in 2026. We are moving along through this, and we've just talked a few issues. What about we move to energy and nuclear waste disposal on private property versus public lands. If it goes to private property, the Wyoming's treasury doesn't collect near as much as
Yeah.
they do if it's sited on public lands. What what's your viewpoint, your vantage point on Wyoming being the wasteland site for
Yeah.
other states or our own nuclear endeavors?
Yeah, Eric, when it comes to energy, I want to actually zoom out just a teeny tiny bit first to say with the nuclear energy issue, problem, challenge, whatever you want to call it, we need to identify and solidify a federal repository. That is the federal government's responsibility to figure that out. Now, we know, obviously, states are refusing this, right? So we have a national and international problem of what in the world are we going to do with this nuclear waste? What are we going to do with this energy? Because we like nuclear energy. It's clean. It is relatively safe. Like with anything, there are those dangers. By the way, getting safer if you educate yourself. Some of the new nuclear energy technologies are getting safer. It's safer. It's safer. But the real question is, what do we do with this waste and energy in general? We are moving still full steam ahead with these other renewable energies, the windmills, the solar farm. I mean, they just passed right just recently a big expansion of solar farms in near Cheyenne. And this stuff is toxic. It's bad for the environment. They call it green, and it's the furthest thing from it. And so the energy challenge is a real one because we are addicted to energy. So we need energy. Now there is some technology they're working on now where we have zero waste energy where they can reuse this spent fuel, use it to produce energy, and eventually we have no waste, right? But the technology just isn't there yet. I think what I would really like to see in the space of nuclear energy in general, is let's pull back. Let's do the studies, let's do the research, let's figure out what's going to be good for Wyoming, what's going to be good for the future. Let's make a comprehensive plan that supports that goal or that vision. And then let's execute it in a way that the public is educated. Because I'm going to go back to this point, this sort of we just fearmonger the public, right? We make everybody afraid of everything. And we use fearmongering to get those votes. How about we take the time to actually educate the public on, okay, here are the pros, here are the cons, here are the benefits, here are the downsides. Let's educate ourselves. By the way, I'm not a nuclear specialist, but let's educate ourselves in a way that we can actually make novel idea, right? Educated decisions on these things instead of just going nuclear waste bad. Let's not look at this. Let's not consider this. And right now, I believe it's federal law. If we're producing nuclear energy in Wyoming, we store that nuclear waste on site at this point. So that still presents sort of a nuclear waste problem. And so this is not just a Wyoming problem. This is a federal and I would argue even an international issue that we've got to figure out.
Wyoming citizens have asked in the past week across social media to see the studies that have been done. They asked who completed the studies.
Yeah.
Those questions, 5 consecutive questions, identical restatements, all ignored and
Yeah.
bypassed.
Yeah.
Why do you think that it's important to study and study, but not? Why is that? Why is that information that's being paid for, being promoted, being completed, not being disclosed? Why would that be?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One, the studies obviously aren't favorable, and so, boy, if we release a study, it's going to kind of prove the point that this is not a favorable outcome for Wyoming. That could be one reason. The other reason I think, and I think possibly the more likely reason, Eric, is we don't know. We haven't done the due diligence that we need to do to make educated decisions on this. It's a yes or a no. It's a knee-jerk reaction. Nuclear bad. Oh, by the way, Eric, I mean, we store the lion's share of the U.S.'s nuclear weapons in Wyoming, right? We have a lot of them here in Wyoming. Do we have any issue with that? It's nuclear. I mean, it's nuclear, and they're in our prairies, in our fields. I mean, I don't know where they are, but we've got nuclear weapons all over this state. So what if something goes bad with one of those and one of those goes off?
I remember years ago when the MX missile was being talked about, and the transport of MX missiles across the state and the United States of America. That was a topic that I recall. It was
Yeah,
that safety
yeah.
issue. But you're
Um,
right. There's these tools of the military and our government. They have flown under the
it, it
radar
it's
in these
it's
conversations.
nuclear too, and
Yeah.
I would say this, Eric, it's kind of like flying in an airplane, right? Uh, if an airplane crashes, the chances of survival are next to none, right? But you're more likely to experience a car crash, right? And so when we look at nuclear, yes, is it incredibly dangerous when something goes wrong? Absolutely. But if you look at the safety aspect of it, it's also historically extremely safe.
If if nuclear is so powerfully important for Wyoming, one constituent comments, well, let's put it in Yellowstone National Park. Let's do it in let's do it in that Wyoming corner that's designated Yellowstone National Park. If it's such a good thing for Wyoming and the United States of America, let's put it right there in the most beautiful, perhaps most majestic lands that we have. Which brings us to wildlife. Wildlife management in the state of Wyoming. What's your vantage point on the state of wildlife management? Uh, Harriet Hageman has talked about delisting
Mhm.
the grizzly
Yeah,
and perhaps wolves. Management should be that of the state, not federal. And at this
yeah.
point,
I think people at property needs to come first before anything. I consider myself a conservationist, certainly not an environmentalist when it comes to these issues. Um, so yeah, I think people at property have got to come first. But on that note, while wildlife management, when we think about, we tried to pass a bill this last session to bring the federal lands into state control. But what we didn't do was really have a plan for what are we going to do with this? Are we going to, are we going to sell it? Are we going to manage it? Are we going to close it? Are we going to open it? What are we going to do? You know what I'd really like to see from legislature, from government in general, from the top down. And by the way, this starts at the top. Is let's make a plan before we can all have a lot of really super great ideas. Before we try to execute those ideas, let's actually make a plan. And whether it's with public lands or wildlife management, let's actually make a plan to do that. There was a big fight recently over these landowner tags. Should a landowner, depending on acreage, get X amount of tags that they can sell or do what it is that they do? I know some of these get donated to veterans organizations, which is phenomenal. But this idea, this commercialization of it, maybe it's not such a great idea because it does affect Wyoming. It does affect hunters. It does affect these things. So I think that there's ways that we can manage better, but also that we need to put people and property first. And yeah, environment is extremely important. Again, I consider myself an outdoorsman. I consider myself a conservationist. But when we're talking about, since we're going to allow, let's say, wolves, the state will reimburse you, or the federal government will reimburse you if these wolves kill your livestock. Okay, I'm not sure that makes a ton of sense, Eric. To be totally honest with you.
Joseph Kibler, our guest on the Talk Shop this morning, how will you bring people together? How will you unite Wyoming so much fragmentation
Mm.
of Wyoming and the United States of America today. How will you be something different, and is uniting us your
Yeah.
goal?
Well, I better be something different since that's one of my campaign slogans, Eric. And I will tell you what I would do exactly what I've done for the last 6 months. I will make phone calls. I will reach out. I will sit at the table. I will have the conversations that people are not willing to have right now. I will call out our leaders and the loud voices out there when they're not speaking the truth or not behaving in reflection of what the values they supposedly hold. A lot of us, and Eric, this won't be for everybody in your audience, but you go to a lot of these, political meetings and gatherings, and they pray in Jesus' name. They say that we believe in the Bible or in this faith. But the way that we behave and act and talk reflect those values? And it doesn't even have to be biblical. And I can just step back from that, from my faith for a moment, and say that we talk about these values that we believe in conservatism or whatever, but are we living it? Are we breathing it? Are we talking about it? No, we're not. We're not. And I will say that with just emphatically, we are not doing that. So that is what I will be doing to be something different, is have those hard conversations. I don't want to make legislation about education just for the sake of doing it. What I want to do, bring in the educators, bring in the legislators, go beyond the committees and the studies and stuff. Bring the people together into the table, the leaders, and hash the thing out and figure out what's actually going to work for our kids instead of just putting more band-aids on education. Roll back the band-aids, roll back the legislation, give teachers the freedom back to teach. Give them an environment that they would like to work in. You do the same thing for doctors. Doctors shouldn't, our medical board should not have to get permission from the legislature to decide if ivermectin is okay. Let the doctors make those decisions. And so that's what I'm passionate about. And I will bring those people who won't talk to each other into a room, sit them down, and let's hash this out. Let's have a conversation. Let's act like adults. Let's act like civility. Eric, this brings up another point. Are you wanting to take a break here pretty soon, or
We
what do you want to
can
do?
we can roll if you're good. I'm ready to continue.
Okay.
One
Okay.
one constituents question is pending, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to close your thought on this.
Yeah.
this
Okay. I'll
topic.
close my thought on
If
that. So I
if
did.
you need a break, let's do it.
Yeah. No. So I'll close my thought on that. I did a survey across Wyoming. Oh, I guess it's been about a month now, and I said, if there's describe in one word, what is something that you see missing in politics or in Wyoming culture that you would like to see? And I had no assumption of what that word would be, but the winning word across Wyoming, hands down, was the word empathy. That was the number one word that Wyoming wanted, was empathy. And I thought a lot about it. And it's this idea of human kindness and listening and caring and having true empathy for our fellow man, that we may not always see eye to eye, but I can walk away from the table and we could still be friends. That we can have empathy for your situation, which is, by the way, why we're going to be telling these Wyoming stories. I'm calling it Beyond the Fence. We so often live in this little fence that we are in, and maybe it's our party alignment, maybe it's the Freedom Caucus fence, maybe it's the Wyoming Party fence, maybe it's my fence, my physical fence at my house. And we don't go beyond that fence, Eric, to really get to know and really get to understand the people that we're representing.
In this day and age,
Yeah.
do you know your neighbor? I mean,
Yeah.
any more, that becomes a question. You bring up a nice transition point. We're going to take 2 phone calls lighting up the board right now on the Talk Shop in Studio 255. I'm Eric Henderson. Today's guest, Joseph Kibler, for Wyoming Governor in 2026. We'll be back perhaps with your questions to be answered by Joseph Kibler after this. Cool.
All right, folks, we're gonna take a short break, and then I will get back on the live stream here in just a few minutes.